Welcome, everyone, to the Below Average Joe's MMA Podcast Monday edition. Dominic, we're here with the nice little new touch to the audio. How are you feeling, my friend? Start of a brand new week and a brand new era. Below Average Joe's.
Let me tell you, you sound ultra crispy today coming through my ears, and I'm hoping we sound the same to our listeners. Again, we talked about it on Friday, and here we are Monday. Our new setups have arrived, another evolution of the podcast as we continue to grow. So it's great. It feels good to be in the studio with you today. 138 episodes deep, and there's just no signs of slowing down, if I'm being honest with you, Noah. So how are you? How was your weekend? It's Fantasy Football Sunday. We got some games starting soon, so we're getting the podcast recording in early. Are you ready for some football?
100%. I feel like we talk more about football sometimes on this podcast than MMA, but you know what? It is football season, and NFL Sunday is starting as we're recording. Within the hour, I should say, is when it's starting. Yes. And I'm a big Bengals fan, so hooday to all my Cincinnati Bengals fans out there, all 12 of us. Dominic, I know you don't have a team that you cling to, correct?
This is true. The only team I cling to is the Dominators in both of my fantasy leagues, my friend.
That's, Dominic, I'm not sure if I admire that or if I find that pathetic. But anyways, let's get into our fight announcements today.
All righty, let's do it.
Fuck. Start with November 6th, UFC 268. We know how stacked that card is from top to bottom.
Oh, yeah.
Too stacked because the MMA God said, we giveth and then we taketh away. As Germaine De Randamie is now out of her scheduled bout with Irene Aldana. Unclear if Aldana will stay on the card or if they'll move the fight. I have an inkling they'll probably just move the fight. That card's already so stacked, like you don't really have to force some kind of lopsided matchmaking there with Aldana against some late replacement. But what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, this was a good fight. Essentially, you could view it as a maybe number one contender. You never really know in this division. But for Aldana, especially someone that would be a fresh matchup potentially for the champion in Muniz or Juliana Pena. Again, we're not overlooking when that fight happens. But I digress. So it was a good fight. It's an interesting stylistic clash because both are so good on the feet. So GDR, obviously the world-class Muay Thai striker, goes down with an injury. Hopefully it's nothing too serious. Maybe we can get that rebooked before the end of the year because it does have big implications for both of those ladies and that top 5 of the bantamweight division. So get well soon for GDR. Hopefully we see that one come together.
Sure. December 4th. We have a rebooking. Actually, this fight was supposed to happen on October 2nd. Kind of quietly just got rebooked here, and that's Jimmy Crute and Jamahal Hill, the two biggest up-and-comers from the light heavyweight division. I'm not going to call them prospects. Those guys, I think, have crashed through the glass ceiling, if you will.
Right.
But definitely up-and-comers still, young guys, both fighting through some adversity here. You got Jimmy Crute, who got his ankle numbed by the calf kicks of Anthony Smith or something. I don't know what really happened there.
That's true.
And then Jamahal Hill got his arm torn out of place, which ended up not being torn, I guess, but his arm popped out of place and flapping in the wind as he got elbowed in the face. So
how there was no serious injury there, I still do not know.
Yeah, so we got two guys coming off of what should have been pretty serious injuries, but it seems like maybe weren't the most serious of injuries. But regardless, glad this fight's still happening. Even though I'm not always a fan of putting two of your bigger, I guess, up-and-comers against one another this early, I do think that there's a chance that one of these guys may start to kind of fizzle out. Both coming in here off losses. Neither one looking all that great in their last fights against proven commodities of the light heavyweight division. I just could see the winner of this fight really being the one that kind of gets the promotion behind them and the loser kind of starting to fade off a little bit. Just saying, I still love both these guys and think the talent's there. But, you know, the light heavyweight division has improved a lot over the last couple of years, so it's not quite the cakewalk it used to be.
Right, 100%. And like you said, the winner could be the one that the UFC really starts to get behind. For the loser, not necessarily out of anything, but definitely going to be a slower push moving forward, forever who comes out of that, the loser. But yeah, both great young fighters there. It should be a really fun one for the fans, however long it lasts, because those two come to bang.
Mm-hmm. Last one here, December 11th, UFC 269. This is a great fight.
Yes.
This is an immaculate fight. Andre Muniz, he's now ranked number 13. He's going up against Dricus du Plessis. Now, this fight is a battle of two up-and-comers in some ways.
For sure.
But I can't help it, man. I love this fight. Andre Muniz, this is the guy who just submitted and tore the forearm in half of Jacare Souza. That was a battle that I really thought actually favored Jacare at this point, because both guys who really depend on their jiu-jitsu in a lot of their fights. And when you're going up against a Jacare and you're quite the jiu-jitsu practitioner, that's usually a losing battle. Mm-hmm. But Muniz beat him with the jiu-jitsu, which was just uber impressive.
Yes.
Then in the other end, you got Dricus, who I think it was Trevin Giles he knocked out in his last fight. I don't know. Yep. I can't remember if it was Trevin Giles or Trevin Jones. I think it was Trevin Giles.
One of the two Trevins.
Yeah, I think it's Trevin Giles. But that was a battle of two prospects in a lot of ways. And Dricus looked fantastic on the feet. The dude's a brute. He lands with power. He lands with authority. So I think you got a really fun matchup here between two guys that bring different styles, but ultimately neither one's going to want to back down from the other because they're both really trying to make splashes here in the division.
Yeah, and you would think it's almost like they kind of have strengths and the other guy's weaknesses. Not that either of them aren't well-rounded. They are, but Andre, of course, is the fantastic jiu-jitsu ace. Obviously, if you submit Jacare Souza, that says a lot about your skills in that area. And for Dricus, a great wrestler and grappler, but carries a lot of power, gets a lot of knockouts. So I'll be curious to see kind of how they may or may not cancel each other out, who's going to get the upper hand. Definitely a huge battle between very big prospects there, especially on that big card, a big opportunity for both guys to get their name out there. And for Dricus, he can crack into the top 15. If Andre wins, he can begin to look into the top 10. Big fight. I love it.
Mm-hmm. So that's going to wrap it up for the fight announcements. Let's talk about Gable Steveson, Dom.
Let's do it.
I don't think there's been anybody that's quite dominated a free agency like Gable Steveson. I mean, this guy was using the social media to toss feelers out for every promotion from East to West Coast. He was meeting with Vince McMahon, Triple H, and Scott Coker, and I guess he never did actually meet with Dana White, but was supposed to meet with Dana White. So this guy made it very clear that he highly values his talent, and he was going to treat himself as such here in this free agency period. He has made his decision. He is signing with World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE. And, it's probably a decent move on his part. Not saying that he couldn't come right in and make a big splash in MMA right away, but I would assume that the pay in professional wrestling would be higher. Ultimately, you're working a lot more days a year, but I mean, I don't know how the pay works there, but I'm just saying you're working all these days a year. I'm sure you're going to make more money than most MMA fighters do. So good for him there. And there's always the chance down the road that
of course,
he builds up his star power. And this is why the headline says the next Brock Lesnar ? Because not only are these two powerhouse wrestlers that came from the University of Minnesota, but also both going to start in the WWE, build their stardom up, and maybe, just maybe, Gable Steveson finds his way into an octagon at some point. However, I kind of questioned the UFC for this decision. And at first I didn't, because when it first happened, I went, well, that makes sense. The UFC saying they want this guy to kind of go prove it on the circuit and then maybe come in on a contender series contract. But I realized that the UFC's actually signed people to I don't know what you call it, a prospect deal before. This is the kind of deal that Greg Hardy got, that Mackenzie Dern got, where they were basically signed into the UFC, but they were still being put on like LFA cards and stuff when they first started.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of question why the UFC didn't push harder to sign Gable Steveson, because considering how the UFC is always, very sound with their money, you would think that it would make more sense to try to get this guy while his stock is at least lower than what it could be once he really builds up his star power in WWE. So I actually think it's a bit of an oversight by the UFC here to miss out on this opportunity. But, you don't know for sure. The WWE can almost guaranteed make this guy a star if they really want him to be.
Yeah.
UFC doesn't have that kind of cushion.
100%, man. I mean, for Gable, obviously it seems he made the best decision for himself financially, short-term, long-term, whatever the case. I mean, he's 23 years old. This guy has so much time ahead of him to continue building his star power as he already has done. Like Noah said, have we ever seen someone dominate free agency like this and be wanted and just a commodity for essentially everything in combat sports outside of boxing, I guess? So shout out to him. Yeah, I'm really curious to see how the WWE will go about kind of building his brand, how they will go about his character, quote unquote, in the organization. And then, of course, obviously in the future, can he become what Brock Lesnar became? We have the Minnesota wrestling. We got that in check. Now, Gabe also has a gold medal to his name, so he's ahead of Brock in that aspect. So if he goes into WWE, dominates for a few years, and potentially can still build his actual MMA skills on the side. I know it's a lot of work in the WWE, a lot of traveling and work. But if he can, I think we're going to see this man in one of the prominent MMA organizations within the next few years, 100%. And for that, I'll just be very excited to see where he is now is already huge and what he can become in the future. Gable Steveson, he's on everyone's radars for quite some time.
Well, I guess I'll just throw out a devil's advocate point here, Dom, and see what your thoughts are on it, because I think we're being super positive about Gable Steveson right now. But do you think this move, in terms of, and I'm not saying he should consider this, but we're an MMA podcast. So at the end of the day, we focus on the MMA side of things. So because of that, does this move ultimately, no matter if he eventually comes to MMA or not in a few years, does this stunt his growth and his potential and as an MMA fighter, considering if he's not starting MMA now? And like your point there, like when I heard that, when you're like, well, maybe he can work on those skills while he's out on the road. And I'm like, there's no way he's going to be able to do that. He's got the rock solid wrestling, won an Olympic gold medal with it. Brock Lesnar, that was all he really had when he came to the UFC was his wrestling. The guy hated being punched in the face and wasn't much of a striker, but, just such a powerhouse of a man that, he was able to really make it work. Does that kind of the same thing you're going to see with Gable Steveson, like a very just centralized skill set, but not exactly a well-rounded fighter if he ever comes to the UFC?
I'm glad you played a little devil's advocate there, Noah. So, yeah, you would think it's obvious. No, he cannot really work much on MMA skills being in the WWE. And it's just, I think in that instance, it does hurt him in the long term if he does want to come or eventually get into MMA. In terms of when you look at when Brock came, it was so much different, and it not easy, but it was so much easier for Brock to launch in at that point in the sport than what it would be for Gable now. You look at this heavyweight division and the well-roundedness of these top 5, top 10, even top 15 guys. It's a whole different ball game now for Gable to come in than what it was for Brock back in the day. And granted, Brock was just this huge guy that had power, and I'm sure Gable has power, but still, once you get in there with all the other elements of MMA, it's just such a different world. So in that instance, yes, I think it does hurt him a little in terms of maybe what his goals are if he really does want to make a push in MMA one day.
I don't even think that there is a talent evolution. These heavyweights are just a lot more well-rounded today, at least overall from consensus standpoint. But I think it's more just a level of athlete in general that MMA has been able to bring in.
Mm-hmm.
You go back to when Brock came in around 2007, 2008. Some of the guys that were competing at the top were not exactly the most athletic of individuals. Guys that might have power, they might have a wrestling skill set, or a boxing skill set, but they were flabby, fat dudes. And Brock Lesnar comes in, and he is this
Brick
uber
shit
freak
house.
of a man.
Yeah.
And, he kind of just squashed a lot of the people that he fought. I mean, I think that it won't be quite, you're right. It won't be, not that it was necessarily easy for Brock. I mean, he was kind of given an easier route, but I mean, the guy at the end of the day did have to beat Randy Couture. He did have to beat Heath Herring. He did have to beat Frank Mir.
Yeah.
So I mean, he has he's got legitimate wins, but he was kind of given the path by the UFC to make sure. I mean, he won one fight in the UFC, and they were like, title shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with that being said, I don't think Gable Steveson quite has that level. It's hard for me to imagine that guy ever really being able to replicate that, just because I think the UFC's just evolved so much since then that I don't know if they'll really need to do that with a guy like Gable Steveson when they have other guys in their promotion that might be very popular by then and have their backing. So, I part of me thinks if I had to bet now, since I told you, Dom, I've been listening to the MMA Beat recently, which was a show ran through MMAfighting.com back in like 2012 up until about 2018 or so. So I've been starting from the beginning, and I find it very interesting when these people they're like, oh, will we ever see a Floyd Mayweather type in MMA? Will there ever be that big of a star? We now know Conor McGregor has basically reached that.
Yeah.
But at the time, everybody was so pessimistic about it. So for that sake, for the people that are listening to this or watching this 10 years from now, this one's for you.
Yes.
Gable Steveson will never fight in MMA. That's my prediction.
Heard it
so
here
you guys
first,
can come back here and shit on me in 10 years. Anyways.
Fair enough.
Next headline here. Dominic, the bantamweight division at Bellator has been shaken up just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
That's because the current bantamweight champion from Rizin and the former bantamweight champ from Bellator, Kyoji Horiguchi, has re-signed with Bellator. Apparently, the details of this deal are still very interesting because he's going to remain the Rizin bantamweight champion and will apparently be defending, I guess, because Bellator and Rizin have at times done
cross-promotional.
Yeah, they've done like cross-promotional fights. And that's the whole reason why Horiguchi became Bellator bantamweight champ in the first place. So now that the deal's been made, pen's been put to the paper, give me your thoughts on the signing, and ultimately, where does this place Horiguchi immediately into the bantamweight rankings? And is he the next title challenger right off the bat?
Yeah, I love this signing for Bellator, and we don't get to watch much of like Rizin or One Championship and all that because we're here in the States and the time differences are just too much. So we just get to see like a lot of highlights and whatnot. But a lot of people think that Horiguchi is one of, if not the best bantamweight across all promotions in MMA. So the fact that he can now come back to Bellator where he'll get more domestic eyes on him as well as international, I think is a big deal. It's a big signing for Bellator. Their bantamweight division is one of their better divisions in their promotion right now. And I think, yes, it does put him right into title contention. And I want to point out, because we kind of mentioned this when we talked about it, when Rafion Stotts fought Magomedov, he kind of hinted at, well, maybe I don't want to go right into the title because he's training partners with Sergio Pettis, and he hinted at like a Grand Prix and everything. Or Horiguchi saying, well, shoot, I'll sign right now and go right in to become the champion again.
Yep.
So it might align perfectly for him and Bellator's new big signing. But either way, this division is so stacked. You obviously have the former champ too, and Juan Archuleta. So a lot of top-heavy guys in this division, adding in a former champion in Horiguchi with a belt from another promotion. So you get that whole cross-promotion deal with potentially 2 titles, all that fun stuff. It's good times for Bellator. It has been all year, and I love everything about this signing. And to see Horiguchi now domestically, I'm very excited personally just to see him fight live.
Yeah, Horiguchi signing here definitely puts him in contention for being the top pound for pound fighter in Bellator. It's kind of a shame when he won the Bellator bantamweight title, it was under contract that he would have to defend once a year. That was sort of the agreement because he was under contract with Rizin at that point. But he got a pretty nasty injury a few months later, so they basically had to strip him. So he never did get to defend that Bellator bantamweight title. But, Dominic, that means that he is technically the lineal bantamweight champion there since he never did lose the belt. So I definitely think due to Rafael Stotts' comments, it couldn't have lined up any better for Horiguchi here, to be honest.
100%.
You got the guy who made himself the number one contender basically say, I don't know if I want the fight.
Right.
And also, I just love the idea of a Grand Prix now. I mean, bantamweight division is probably the best division Bellator has.
I think so. Yeah.
Honestly, bantamweight's becoming the best division in MMA, if not already is. And I would love to see a Grand Prix to kind of prove that talent. And you could totally fill that with 8 of your top guys from Bellator. That would be amazing. I would love to see a Grand Prix. But in the meantime, Sergio Pettis, Kyoji Horiguchi, book it. It's going to happen. And
it may just be the next title fight.
That is a tough first defense for a very much coming into his own Sergio Pettis, but a guy that's still got a lot of growth to do. That'll be a really tough fight, but I look forward to it if and when it happens.
Oh yeah, that's got to be the one for sure.
So now we're going to move on to a little UFC story here that coming off of that main event from last Saturday where Derek Brunson got a very dominant win over Darren Till. A lot has kind of came out about this fight in the aftermath, mostly about its 2 competitors and kind of what they were going through coming into the octagon. After the fight, right away, Ali Abdelaziz comes out and says that Derek Brunson fought with torn cartilage and fractured ribs. That doesn't sound fun.
No.
And then a couple days after, Darren Till's coach, I believe, comes out. It says that Darren Till tore his ACL 9 weeks before this fight and ultimately basically fought with a torn ACL, therefore, that Saturday. So, Dominic,
crazy.
I'm going to focus on the Darren Till side of things here because ultimately he was the loser of this bout, and it's the more serious injury to be fighting with.
Yeah.
So the question here is, does this change anything in your eyes about not necessarily the result of the fight, but more how we treat, does this change anything about how you think about Darren Till and kind of his future prospects in the division?
Well, first off, I do just want to say to your point that because you've done this before on the show, when people go into fights, very rarely are they 100%. And here's another example of that right here. But yeah, for Darren Till, what a guy, right? To go out there, he knew that this was built for him, essentially, in the United Kingdom, the early time slot and everything. And he's like, you know what? I'm not doing it. He had pulled out of a fight prior. He hadn't fought in quite some time. This was the big opportunity. So massive respect to him. I just hope that, first off, no further damage what happened in the fight outside of the already torn ACL. And in terms of his future, what does it do for him and his prospect status in that division as a contender? It remains to be seen, I guess, because now you got to think we're going to go quite some time before we see Darren Till again. So his prime years are now really starting to take a strain here with these injuries. I mean, before this one, he hadn't fought since the Whitaker fight, which was, last June or August of 2020? Yeah. So a whole year goes by. Now, again, it's probably going to be at least 8 to 10, if not more than a year, because we know how those ACL injuries go. So I hate to see it for a guy that is such a character, such a personality, but can back it up in the octagon with his striking and such. So all the respect in the world of Darren Till. I just hope that the best of Darren Till has not happened yet. I hope we haven't missed that due to these injuries and what this injury will become. And then, of course, for Derek Brunson, if those injuries were for real as well, shout out to him for going out and still implementing a perfect game plan, getting the biggest win of his career. It's just crazy what these fighters go through, and ultimately for our entertainment, it's crazy. Puts it into perspective.
Yeah, that was an interesting route you went with that one. That's not exactly what I thought you were going to get into, but very valid points for sure. I won't even entertain the any sort of, I haven't seen a lot of it, thankfully, but I won't even entertain it on this show. I won't even play a devil's advocate and ask you like, oh, does this diminish Derek Brunson's win? Fuck that. 2 guys got in the cage that Saturday.
Yep.
1 guy won, did it in dominant fashion. That's all you can go off of.
Yep.
That's all that matters. But you are right. I've definitely said that multiple times, and I stand by that. No fighter usually does go into the cage at 100%. That's why those Derek Brunson injuries don't surprise me. But, my God, Darren Till fighting on a torn ACL. If that's true, I almost have to question the people around him a little bit. I mean, he tore his ACL, you're telling me 9 weeks before this fight? I mean, it's not like he stepped into the cage and tore his ACL in the beginning of the fight. That
means a full training camp with it.
Yeah, I mean, and lack thereof. There was some comments made about his frame on Saturday, maybe that he looked a little out of shape. I didn't necessarily get that, but I see where people – I'm a big guy, so it's hard for me to really judge, you know what I'm saying? But I definitely wasn't really focused on that aspect, I guess, but some people – had that takeaway. Mm-hmm. Well, that would make a lot of sense that the guy basically couldn't train for the entire camp.
No kidding.
And this doesn't diminish Derek Brunson's win, in my opinion, but it just, man, it is a shame because Darren Till, you're right. When you really think about it, the amount of injuries he's had already in his relatively short UFC career, it's pretty astounding, and all of them very time-consuming injuries.
Yeah, they're not just smaller ones.
Long layoffs, and sometimes 2 fights having to pull out in a row, and that's a bit gutting for a young guy like Darren Till, who's constantly kind of got his back against the wall at this point, and is trying to fight through adversity, really trying to prove that he's one of the best, and that's just a lot to put on a guy's mental state and a lot to put on his shoulders. So hopefully Darren Till, positive vibes is what I want to send to Darren Till.
Oh, yeah.
And hopefully he can recover well from this and get in there and prove it in his next bout. But, that next bout's going to have a ton of pressure on him. Let's say it's today, a year from now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if he loses that bout, I mean, we're talking a year ahead, but if he loses that bout, 1-3 in the division potentially, that's not going to be great when we're talking about that. And, so hopefully he can eventually, whether it's a year from now or whatever, get into like a state of just being more active. I think that would be the best thing for him at this point. But understandably, if he tore his ACL, can't exactly be the most active fighter in the world right now. So it's disappointing. But what a fucking savage. And honestly, I just question the people around him because I know Darren Till's a savage. I don't need him to prove me he's this much of a savage. He shouldn't have fought if he had a tore ACL.
It's crazy.
Maybe some fighters will, if any fighter listens to this, maybe they scoff at me or roll their eyes like, come on, dude. Like, we all go through shit. I get it. I get that, like, fighters go into the cage with injuries. This is a torn ACL. This isn't just
a little different.
This isn't dinks and bruises. This is like a very serious injury. And I don't know. I don't know if it was worth it. I mean, I guess in hindsight it wasn't, but at what cost? Now,
that's a great segue there, Noah.
Now we're on to the Contender Series. So this is kind of into our recap portion of the weekend recap.
We love fights on a Tuesday, Noah.
Excuse me as I cough directly into your ears, listeners. So week 2 of the Contender Series took place on Tuesday. And just so I don't cough again, Dominic, you introduced kind of what your thoughts were on the fights and the contracts.
Fair enough. So we had a 5-fight night, and there were 3 finishes, 2 split decisions. Much like last week, every single winner did receive a contract into the UFC, even the 2 with the split decision victories. So take for that what it's worth. I know Noah's going to have a little bit more to say on that than I will, but I'm going to kind of just discuss the guys that went out there and put on a clinic with their finishes. Josh Keenan knocked out Logan Urban, which was just brutal. He went right in from the get-go. It only took 47 seconds. Landed a shot. Funny enough, it was right after DC had went Yeah, so Logan Urban really believing in himself, thinks he's going to go out here and put on a performance, and then bam, he gets popped with a big shot, and the poor guy never even had a chance. He was just in survival mode, and Josh inevitably got the finish there. Finished it with a brutal like elbow up on the fence too. All of these finishes that, or at least most of them in the Contender Series, are always such brutal fashion. A lot of them are. Chidi and Jokuani TKO'd Mario Souza. Big. He was 32 years old. Already had a record of 19-7. So you don't see that very often in the UFC. Had been fighting in the LFA, like 20 fights in professional kickboxing. So one of the most experienced people that I've got to witness on that show went out there, took some brutal low blows in the first round. By the way, a point got deducted from his opponent, then implemented a great game plan in rounds 2 and 3, and then ultimately got the finish in the third round with ground and pound. So he looked good there, obviously got a contract. And then the other finish, Carlos Vergara TKO'd Bruno Correa, or Coria, I guess is what it probably is. But round 1, also only 41 seconds. So two of these guys went out there like they were fighting for their lives and got a finish in under 50 seconds. So again, it just comes out to this whole, the ultimate job interview, the biggest one of your life. And they go out there and they put on a show. Obviously, the finishes are looked at and held in high regard. But this is where Noah's going to be segued here, because it looks like so are decision victories this far through 2 weeks in the Contender Series.
Yeah, so now that I've cleared my Golic, cleared the vid out of me real quick, I gotta find a better way to articulate myself, I think, sometimes, because I don't feel good. Like the last time we talked about Contender Series, I don't feel good about, like, for the sake of a TV product, bashing these guys getting the biggest opportunity of their lives. Their lives are made. I don't like the idea of being like, well, that was a split decision, so that guy shouldn't be brought in. So all I'm going to say is, because I feel so bad about it, I'm just going to say there were good fights on here, some really good finishes.
Yes.
And every winner got a contract, 2 of which were split decisions. Would I have given those guys contracts if I were in Dana White's shoes? Maybe I would have, but I would, as a guy sitting on my couch eating Cheetos while I was watching it, I was like, I wouldn't have given those guys contracts. So do with that what you will. I mean, one of the guys, the first bout was, his name was Chad Onlinger, and he got a win over Gafarov is what I'm going to call him, because I don't know how to pronounce his first name. But that was a fight where Gafarov was the biggest favorite of the night.
Yeah.
And Endlinger put up a really good performance. It was a back and forth fight, but he ultimately got a split decision, and he should have won the fight, in my opinion.
I agree.
Even though he came in as a big underdog and he performed a lot better than probably people thought. I think a lot of people like that Gafarov guy, and I'm sure he'll be back, but did I necessarily think that performance warranted a contract into the biggest talent pool of MMA in the UFC?
Right.
It was a great win, but but you already weren't looked at. I mean, he was brought in as like kind of a guy that's like, all right, this guy's okay, but he's probably not going to be a guy we bring. Like, really, he probably wasn't looked at as being a likely name to be brought in because he was such a big underdog.
Right.
However, he overperformed, and Dana White was impressed, I guess, and gave him the contract. I don't know. I'm saying to the people, as a TV product, and maybe I shouldn't focus on that aspect of it, it's just becoming a little watered down when every winner gets a contract. If every winner deserves it, that's fine, but some of these fights aren't really contract worthy, in my opinion. It's just. But again, here I go again. I'm feeling terrible about even saying that. So at the end of the day, I need to probably watch this more as I need to watch this more from like a scouting perspective. Scouting for the Below Average Joe's MMA podcast. Okay. I'm on there
series.
Watching it. Oh, yeah, exactly. New series. I'm scouting just to see the next level of talent to come into the promotion. Guys that need to be on our radar, Dom.
Yeah.
That's what I need to switch my brain into. Not that I'm just watching like the new season of Survivor or some shit.
Okay.
Everybody should watch Survivor, by the way. That show's awesome.
My dad used to watch that show religiously.
I've been binge watching it. I'm on season 7.
Wow. There's a lot of seasons. Good luck with that.
There's a lot of seasons. Anyways, Contender Series, I love you. Even if I have my gripes so far with this season. But I think I'm going to have a mental switch and just simply enjoy the moment.
There you go.
And enjoy the fights.
So moving forward, our listeners can either roast us or praise us. We'll see what happens next week.
Yeah, I'm sure what the listeners wanted more than anything was more positivity on this podcast.
Right.
Last bit of recap in here. This is what you all waited for.
Yeah, and we saved it for last. You rascals.
Triller boxing.
It's the highest of quality combat sport you can witness. Am I right or what?
Mm-hmm. Yep, okay. that total hyperbole there, but nice. And we're just gonna group the two results that you all came here to hear about together.
All righty.
Anderson Silva knocks out Tito Ortiz in round 1. Vitor Belfort knocks out Evander Holyfield in round 1. Thoughts off the top here. This event sucked. Did I watch it? Nope.
Yep.
But everything I heard about it
was the same as all other Triller cards.
And a bit of things. Okay, hold on. Let me try to articulate my thoughts better now because I don't want to just say, "Oh, this event sucks." I think everybody knows that coming into listening to this. Some things in the lead up here that we missed. There was an alternate version of the broadcast that had Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr. on it. And hey, look, that's a big splash for Triller, to have a former president on your broadcast. Is it a bit of a clown show to like does Donald Trump really know how to talk about fights? I was kind of like, I don't know. I mean, I know he's hosted a lot of them at his casinos, but I didn't really trust it. And sure enough, on his broadcast, he was calling, he said Anderson Silva, stuff that. Yeah, it was not great. But you know what?
I was just going to say, I think Jorge Masvidal also made a guest appearance with him and Donald Trump Jr. So just, Triller somehow picks up big names. So
yeah, I haven't seen anything with Masvidal, but I did just see Donald Trump mispronouncing names. Look, guys, if you like him as a president, politician, that's fine. I'm just simply judging off of the performance on Saturday.
The commentary
wasn't great, but that's probably a big splash for Triller. So cool, whatever. Then you come into these two fights, and I don't know if there was any other result that made sense here. First, you got Anderson Silva, who showed a lot of people how much he has left in the tank in terms of combat sports in his previous outing.
Yep.
And then he takes a huge step back,
to say the least. Yes.
And goes to a co-main on a Triller card against Tito Ortiz, who you guys know, I know a lot. It's fun. It's easy to hate on Tito nowadays, I guess. I still have a lot of respect for what he did for MMA,
yes.
So I refuse to hit a man while he's down. But the guy's not a striker. He's a natural wrestler. He's never been a boxer. He's never been a good boxer at that. So you're boxing Anderson Silva, and you saw what happened. Anderson Silva gets a highlight reel, one-punch knockout in the first round. And then your main event, Vitor Belfort looked like he was back on the TRT.
He was looking pretty swole.
It was no accusations, but the best he's looked probably in about 5 or 6 years, I would say. The fastest he looked. And he came in there against 58-year-old Evander Holyfield, who moved like a 58-year-old. And again, if that was just a normal 58-year-old man who was walking around like that and punching like that, I would go, all right, this guy's actually doing something. This is a former heavyweight and cruiserweight champion of the world, and a guy who was not given a license to box 15 years ago because his skills had diminished that much, according to I want to say it was either New Jersey or New York State Athletic Commission. I digress. This event, you guys know it sucked. You guys know this wasn't good for anybody. If there's any positive takeaway, MMA looks pretty good, I guess, coming out on top in both bouts. You know, Anderson Silva gets a big knockout, and then Vitor Belfort gets a big knockout, I guess. I think that this was a gross event for putting Evander Holyfield in this position. This guy, Florida's State Athletic Commission should be ashamed of themselves.
It was hard to watch that main event.
This event was supposed to happen in California, and they moved it to Florida specifically so they could get clearance for the Evander Holyfield fight. You should be ashamed of yourself, Florida, for having such an inept State Athletic Commission that they would allow something like this to pass. It's fucking bullshit. This guy gave his life to boxing. He is not in peak physical shape. He is. You guys need to protect him from himself at this point. And not allow him a license to fight. He should not have been in there on Saturday, especially not against a man like Vitor Belfort, who, sure, 12 years younger, not the boxer in terms of history that Evander Holyfield is, but a man who moved probably he was 10 years younger than he actually was. So basically almost at a 20-year age gap in terms of ability. This was gross. I don't like this event. And you can say whatever you want. I know Dominic's going to maybe have a little bit of positive for Anderson Silva because, I know you're such a big fan. And that's fine. But the fact that it happened on this event, I can't give it any love. I can't,
Yeah, I mean, Triller's going to be Triller here, and they'll continue to do these type of circus shows. That's why we called it that on Friday. And that main event was hard to watch. And to watch that finish when the highlight popped up on Twitter, it made you feel uncomfortable almost. To see, again, someone in Holyfield who gave his life to boxing, was such a huge name, did so many great things, and then go out there at 58. We saw the sparring footage going into the week, and then you see the actual fight, and you're like, man, what are we doing? If you're Triller, why do you even want to do something like this? And then, of course, the State Athletic Commission. So the main event, man, really gross. And the co-main, I mean, yes, I love Anderson. I love seeing him get the win. I love seeing my guy still have success, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be sitting here doing this podcast. I wouldn't have people over at my house every Saturday watching UFC, yada, yada, yada. So it was great to see him still be in that form, but still a legend in Tito. And if you love him or hate him, you have to respect what he did during those very rock bottom days for the UFC. So to even see him go out like that was tough in terms of for Tito. For Anderson, obviously it's great. We'll see him. But again, it was just such a big step back for Anderson to do a fight like this against an MMA fighter who was a wrestler, never known for his striking. We knew going into this, Anderson, this is made for you to just dominate. I didn't think he was going to do a one-punch knockout. That was crazy. But, it's just these events are just weird. The Triller ones, the YouTube boxing ones, and is there a market for something like this? Like, there's no way that this event did good buys. There's no way. You can't convince me otherwise. So, I mean, I love Anderson, but maybe he'll go get something legitimate next for boxing. Not that Tito's not a legitimate guy, but it wasn't an MMA fight, so it's just so much different. And for Vitor, what do you do? I mean, he's on top of the world calling out Jake Paul. Both of them are calling out the Paul brothers. I don't know what's going to happen. It's a shit show, but people talk about it. People click on things about it. The least we can do is give our thoughts and address the circus show that it is.
Yeah.
What a way to end an episode.
Well, I'm going to give a few more thoughts before we.
Okay.
Sorry, Dominic. I hope I'm not cutting you short.
No. You're good.
I think again, we didn't watch this event, but we're just doing what any person in our shoes would do. And we're trying to find clips on Twitter. We're having people who are watching it kind of send out live tweets and stuff. So we're kind of following that way, So sure, can we really in some ways people might say you can't really judge this event. You didn't watch it. Well, you can turn off this episode right now. Fuck you. Well, we can judge this event if we want to, and we're going to, because this event was garbage. I mean, just from simply a human nature standpoint, there was this whole event, the only thought process was, can we make any money? There was no thought to the athletes involved that this was good for them. Not only Evander Holyfield, Tito Ortiz should not have been in this co-main event. And I get Tito Ortiz is in good shape. He's not, at least diagnosed with any sort of serious health problems. But he was going up against one of the best strikers in MMA history as a 46-year-old wrestler. This is a complete mismatch. Like, why is this fight like that? Seeing him like knocked out cold in there, like I didn't like it. I just was like, and again, I feel like I'm in almost like a minority. Like I saw almost people celebrating and making fun of Tito being knocked out. I'm just like, y'all are kind of goofy. Like it's kind of goofy to be like that when a man gets kicked down. It's one thing to celebrate Anderson. Dominic did that a little bit last night, just because it is a big moment for him. But at the end of the day, like it was a much bigger moment when he beat in a decision Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.
I agree. Yeah.
And I think the cherry on top of this being just like an actual circus was the call outs. There was a guy lower on the card who called out Tyson Fury.
Yeah. Good luck getting that one.
Yeah. Did Anderson Silva actually call out a Paul brother? I saw Vitor. Vitor said, Jake Paul, winner take this 30 million or something.
Yeah, Triller's going to put up 30 million. I don't know where they're going to get that from. Anderson essentially said, like, let's do each Paul brother versus me and Vitor. I didn't see like the whole thing, but I saw that going around. I'm like, well, I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense, but it's just when you go from literally beating a former world champion boxer, Anderson could really test the waters with some of these older boxers and really go out strong with his legacy. But, we'll see.
Yeah, I'm not going to do Paul brothers. Let's do Anderson Silva versus Roy Jones Jr., the boxing fight
the one that got away
back when he was the champion.
100%.
Let's do Vitor Belfort versus Mike Tyson. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's at least something. I don't want to see the Paul brothers going up against these guys either.
I love both of those options that you said.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. I would actually probably buy that if that was a card.
Together?
Even if it was Triller. Even if it was Triller. And I made my stance clear on Triller, but if those two fights were on a boxing card, I bought, unashamed to admit it, I bought Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr. And sure, Jake Paul was the co-main on that with Nate Robinson, but I didn't really care about that. I was just Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr.,
Exactly.
So that's what I want to see, but what do I think is going to happen? I think you're going to see Anderson Silva box a Paul brother, Dom.
Yeah.
And Dominic may quit the show if
I told y'all
or Logan Paul gets his hand raised against Anderson Silva.
Yeah, as much as I don't even want to put this into the atmosphere, I did say in our group chat last night that should Anderson go out and lose to a Paul brother, I will move to Antarctica. So I hope that doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's enough Triller for today. We gotta go wash our mouths out with
I know, I just feel dirty now.
Yeah, but that's going to wrap it up for the MMA Weekend Recap. Hopefully this was a good episode for you guys. Obviously no events outside of, I guess, Triller Boxing, and, we a little late talking about Contender Series, but so a little bit of a slow week, but things are going to be picking up as God, my fucking throat doesn't fall out of my throat's about to come out of my ass or something. I don't know what's going on. Anyways,
can that happen? Or anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
You really want to
know? My mind's racing right now.
Friday, will we be back? We will be back. Oh my God.
We will be back on Friday with an MMA weekend preview. Bellator's back.
Bellator.
The debut of Yoel Romero, may I add.
Ooh, I forgot about UFC. That.
Yeah,
I forgot
Yoel, Phil
Romero.
Davis. Anthony Smith, Ryan Spann on the UFC card. We got some stuff to discuss.
Yep, Anthony Smith making his long-awaited return to Fight Night headliner. I know. I've been seeing it, Dom. I've been seeing. We're going to be getting into this on Friday. I've been seeing a lot of spite out there for Anthony Smith being put in another Fight Night headlining role. But hey, man, it's Lionheart for you.
Oh, I love the guy. Let's go.
Yes. So, and until then, Dominic, and hopefully my throat holds up for the rest of this. Tell the good people where they can find you on social media.
Find me on Twitter, on Instagram, at DSlee14. Find the podcast on Twitter, on Instagram, at BAJ_MMA podcast. Again, thank you all for your support for this last 13 months. We got new equipment. We're going to keep taking this thing to the next level. Content, everything. We love y'all. Appreciate y'all. Noah. get us on out of here and let's go watch some NFL football.
Yeah, I just realized how hilarious it is that we said we were unveiling new setups. And don't get me wrong, it's a big deal for us. But once they turn on this episode, if they're watching on YouTube, there's literally just like a little dick-shaped mic just popping out into just popping out. That's the only change in the setup. Just a little mic just right in front of our face.
And
we got boom arms. We got boom arms. Okay?
Look, here we go.
Yeah. I will not move mine because I have mine in the perfect spot, but I can do that too.
Yeah, we're fancy now. That's what we're saying.
Anyways, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram at ntbaker_. If you go to the link in my bio, it'll take you to a link tree that'll provide you with a list of links to all the platforms the podcast is on, along with social media platforms. So that includes, but it's not limited to, except it kind of is, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube channel, and Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcast. It's all on there, baby. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple links for today's sponsor, Anchor. Shout out to Anchor. Yep, there you go, Dom.
Shout out.
The hand clasp per usual. Mm-hmm. First, leaving a voice message. Do it.
I mean, come on, people.
Do it.
Please. We come on. Come on.
Do it. Please leave us a voice message if you have a question about an upcoming fight, news story, if you just want to say hi or call us a piece of shit.
But do it nicely. Man, well,
yeah.
Whatever you want.
I like a little feistiness, so get in there. Also, there's a link if you want to become a supporter of the podcast. That just provides us with a small little sum of money a month. All that money will go back into improving the quality of the podcast. Promise if you guys donate money, we will get actual mics shaped like dicks, so that way.
Wait a minute.
Anyways, but that's it. We're out. We'll see y'all on Friday.
You're just gonna act like that.